Sustain what? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet. I'm Andy Revkin at the Columbia Climate School, where I run an initiative on communication innovation for impact on sustainability questions. And I'm glad to have on here for the first time Jim Moffitt, who I got to know when Yale's climate communication group last April ran a conversation with Jim. As Twitter's rumblings were beginning, but it was about how he has facilitated the use of this platform, Twitter, as a tool, and not just a one-way alert kind of tool, but a tool for really having kind of situational awareness when emergencies are unfolding, with a focus on extreme weather. He had been doing that before he got to Twitter, and when he was working at Twitter as an engineer in the developer relations group, he facilitated this outgrowth of all kinds of apps and ways to use the data richness of Twitter to inform and boost resilience in cities as far afield as Jakarta, Indonesia. He's here today, having just left Twitter. I'll ask him in a second. I think it was you quit as opposed to being fired, although there was a lot of kind of forced quitting going on as well. And Andrea Thompson, who's the sustainability editor at Scientific American, who has, like me, has written about this question of what could we lose or what could be eroded should Twitter really kind of lose its way now that the extreme storm called Elon Musk is kind of taken over that ecosystem. It is kind of like an extreme storm. It was forecast. There were rumblings, there's going to be a mega. I guess maybe it's like an atmospheric river. It's like one of those arc storm events, but for information, as Musk taking over this platform. So first, I just want to say hello to each of you and ask you how you're doing. Jim, you're in Boulder, where you've been based for a long time, right?
Yeah, I've been here since my 20s. I've been here a long time. I live outside of Boulder in a town called Longmont here in Boulder County.
Were you in the line of fire for the Marshall Fire?
No, I'm about 6 miles north of there, but man, that really seemed to hit home. Remember that day quite well.
Yeah, we're coming up on the anniversary at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to your Twitter journey in a second. But Andrea, how are you doing? And what has life been like for you lately? You, like me, like many journalists, rely on Twitter. But what's your sense of comfort? Your comfort level with the way journalist focused on weather?
Yeah, I'm overall doing well. It's been it's been for a couple of weeks because at the same time everything was sort of blowing up with Twitter. We had the COP27 climate summit happening, so it was a very busy space and lots to watch. And it was one of those. It was sort of weird, writing about the issues with the platform that I am also relying on to kind of keep up with the climate summit and real-time news. As it's personally become a really important tool for me, especially during those sort of real-time events, your hurricanes, flooding, wildfires, that sort of thing. So it's, in addition to the emergency management concerns I wrote about, I think there's a lot of journalist concern about losing this as an important tool.
Yeah, we were talking about the Marshall Fire a second ago, and it was incredibly helpful for me to get a hold of people literally who were there, whose homes were either burned down or not burned down, and did interviews with them. I got much more of a sense of, again, situational awareness, what's actually happened, how is it affecting people's lives. Rather than jumping on an airplane, you can really connect. So then back to Jim. So just tell us a little bit about how you became who you are so far. The thumbnail sketch.
Yeah. Well, going back now, 23 years. I got my master's in environmental engineering and did research around monitoring snow melt and got into instrumentation. And then there's a local company here called One Rain that I guess I was the fourth employee there, and we're in the business of building flood warning base station software. So this is software that receives live data from sensors in the field, and it's used all over the country, counties and cities where these real-time monitoring systems operate. So I was in that area for 13 years building that software, and I was ready for a change. And almost exactly 10 years ago, I heard of a startup in Boulder called GNIP. They were, at the time, a partner of Twitter, and found out more about what they were building, what they were doing, got really interested in that, and took a position there of a developer advocate. And at the time, I was like, what am I doing? I'm leaving flood warning, something I really, really enjoyed, and jumping into this social media position. But quickly, it became obvious that Twitter really could be an extension of these warning systems. And as I learned more about Twitter at the time, just the real-time nature of it, the public nature of it, it was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a natural extension of what I was doing before. And to GNIP and to Twitter's credit, they supported me in these, evangelizing the role of what Twitter could play. I stayed very involved in that community, going to conferences, and it was really interesting over, the first 6-7 years, how showing up at a hydrology conference from Twitter, people would be like, "What are you doing here?" But I presented a lot. I did a lot of data mashups showing, local flood events and how they were trending with the growth or the posting of tweets. And I think it caught a lot of people's imagination, like, oh, this is just another channel that we should be communicating on. But also recognizing that there's just so many tweets about any topic that, of course, that people are tweeting about floods, about incoming hurricanes, et cetera. So that's kind of how I ended up at Twitter. Twitter eventually, about 2 years after I joined GNIP, Twitter acquired GNIP. And that journey continued while at Twitter.
And you're breaking up there a tiny bit, but I'm showing here some of the backstory. Tell me about this. For those of us who aren't programmers, I had to learn what API means, but the idea that there's a way for this data to spill outward. How is Twitter unique in that sense compared to other social platforms? What is it we're talking about when we say API and making an app using Twitter data?
Yeah, application programming interface. So it's just the way that software can talk to other pieces of software. I mean, at its core, it's really how the internet is patched together. So what we provide, or what Twitter provides today, are APIs that let you listen for tweets of interest. It's like supports a querying language where you can build sets of filters with keywords maybe, or certain hashtags, and you pull in just the tweets of interest. So it's really a way to put a lens on, there's 6,000 tweets per second being published. But using these filters, you can pull them in real time. And again, I always am going to stress the real-time nature of this. Like, you can build a filter, a tweet gets posted, and you can have it in your software within a second. So it's extremely fast. And then there's also APIs for automating the tweeting, the posting of tweets. So, if you're running a base station flood warning system software, the reason you have that is to trigger alarms and then to notify when these alarms go off. So in the case of using Twitter for that application, you have some threshold. Maybe the river, rose 2 feet in 15 minutes. Oh, now I'm going to trigger my notifications. And you would use the API to queue up a tweet and send it in an automated fashion.
That's so
it's a two-way street. I mean, it's I found the power of Twitter was listening for tweets of interest, but also, of course, automating the outreach to the public.
So, Andrea, I'd love to get some input from you here as we go forward. Um, I guess here one question I'll ask right away, given that you're out the door at Twitter, Jim, is did you feel like you were just getting started? In other words, I got the sense when you were on that April Yale show that you're still very much in evangelist mode, meaning, hey, everybody, there are these are the things Twitter can do that aren't about who owns it. They aren't about the noise level around politics. They're about data and some of it, something that you really care about. Is this just the beginning stages of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one important point there is that we were about halfway through launching the version 2 of the Twitter APIs. Some of these, we call them endpoints. They're all the different data services and requests that you can make. And, we started that journey about 2 years ago. And I would say we're about halfway through the effort of launching this version 2. So I definitely feel some sadness there that, and part of this work over the last 2 years was really rebuilding the foundation of these APIs. And what that allowed us to do and what we were doing over the last year was really increasing our cadence of how much we were releasing. So, replacements for some endpoints that were, first released maybe 8 years ago. So definitely, yes. Although, I felt like we had been making strides in this area for many years now. And, it's kind of a steady slog of promoting these features of Twitter that I think a lot of people have no idea about. And part of me was excited about, okay, we have a new management, new ownership. They seem to have a science bent. Maybe there's going to be room here for, building more things into Twitter that would make the public's use of Twitter during emergencies even easier. So that remains to be seen, obviously.
So I have more questions, but I'd love to get some input from Andrea, who did a really good story last week about the erosion of trust as one thing that was starting to explode with the blue check sales event. So Andrea, what do you think about when you're thinking about where we go from here and what Twitter is and isn't?
Yeah, that was something that I think so much remains to be seen. A lot is going to depend on when this new revamped Blue Verified comes out. How is the company going to differentiate between users who have purchased this blue check, which until now has meant, this account is run by the person who says it is, that it's run
Right.
by, um, and who is a authoritative, trustworthy source of information. They One of the things I wrote about this in the piece is it's been sort of back and forth. When Blue Verified was first rolled out, there was this separate official tag that went under someone's username. Um, that was killed off pretty quickly. Um, Same day it was rolled out. Then when Blue Verified was put on hold, it seemed to come back, but it hasn't come back everywhere. So you'll see some brand like advertisers that'll have it. In the piece I note, the Weather Channel has it, the National Weather Service doesn't. And none of its local offices do. So I think that opens up the possibility for a lot of confusion for people and sort of, okay, is this, at a quick glance, it's a lot harder now to know whether you can trust the information you're seeing or not. And it sounds like there's maybe some attempts to address that moving forward, but and Jim can probably speak to this better, but from some of the people I've talked to, that's not an easy fix to just automate, who gets that official tag or some other marker that maybe even just comes up during an emergency situation. That's not a thing that can be easily done and quickly. So I think these questions, and this is what makes it so hard, is we don't, as the current Twitter employee I talked to said, this is all just iterating on the fly. and in
Right.
live. There's no testing or thinking about, well, I should say, there were at least some people thinking about some of these questions. There was not a lot of listening to the
Right.
issues raised um, before these features were rolled out, and that alone, I think, is something that can make this erode some of the trust for people and make it a potentially less valuable tool. If you just any given day you don't know what's going on or how to use the system anymore.
Yeah. So, Jim, any thoughts on that? And the other thing I think about is I have gotten input when I've been tweeting about this and uh, on some email threads with internety people. They say, well, you do this on radio, you get your warnings on apps. It doesn't have to be Twitter centric. Is this what is unique about Twitter? What makes it this place that stands out?
Yeah, well, to your first question, I mean, I was waiting for the final design of this revamping of verification. Myself and my team, we maintain and create all the documentation that developers use to understand how to use these APIs. And, we carefully document when you pull a user object or a tweet object, what all these different fields mean. So we were very listening carefully for clues of how this JSON description of an object would change so we could document it. I mean, I think it's one thing. I was kind of excited for okay, let's have some kind of status that shows you're an actual human rather than an automated account. And we had made some progress in that sense where if and I am a true believer that there's amazing good bots on Twitter, both chat bots and automated accounts. And yes, they should be labeled as such. And if you can somehow verify that, yes, I'm a human being using Twitter, you might get a little symbol or something. But obviously this verification and the ability to pay $8 a month to get that is a slippery slope, which I think, in the short time it was rolled out, a lot of lessons were learned. And I too am curious to see what will be announced on November 29th in terms of verification 2.0 or so I think those are critical things. I mean, especially when it comes to emergencies and getting information, obviously, the more that can be done to verify the source, of course, I'm all for that.
So why did you quit?
Well,
I mean,
I hope it doesn't sound cheesy, but for me, my 8-year tenure at Twitter was really all about my colleagues. And the team we have here in Boulder, which is sort of an extension of the GNIP team we had from the acquisition, I learned that of all the engineering teams that drive the features, the products, the API, the endpoints that my team supports, about 85% were let go in that first round. Mm-hmm. And so it's just sort of writing on the wall that without those teams building the things that I go out and talk about, that I sit down and document, that I wasn't sure of the future I would have or my team would have in that type of environment. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's really the main reason.
That's a pretty good reason. And now, do you have a sense, you were talking about the work toward November 29th and the next steps for the API. Who's left?
Yeah, that's top of mind. I really don't know at this point it's public information as being a formerly public company that these endpoints drive through partnerships we have with all kinds of different companies of all different sizes. It drives nearly $400 million a year in revenue. And this is, it's not ad revenue, and it's only 10, 15% of Twitter's revenue at the time, but it's very stable. It's driven by multi-year contracts. It's not, in a recession, it's not going to be affected by advertised spending going down. So Yeah, that's one of my colleagues, Emily, that you're showing. But yeah, I mean, that was our job to go out and work with other developers of all kinds, from academics to I worked with engineering teams at some of the biggest partners we have. Um, but again, without that engineering engine, it was unclear to me if I would have new things to talk about. And yeah.
One of the fun, I wanted to talk about that, the Jakarta example,
Yeah.
because it struck me as particularly neat, unless there are others that are like it, where essentially you've got this sprawling megacity with a lot of low land and flood risk, and that allows information to come in and create a kind of a dynamic map that's generated by users, essentially, um, where to give you sort of more verification of where the flood is severe and that the like. Um, is this something that's remotely replicable using any other data flows? Like, everyone's talking about Mastodon and some of the other platforms. They're still kind of nascent, but do they have the potential for that kind of thing, or is this fundamentally, again, Twitter centric?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. I mean, obviously, I've been very focused on what Twitter brings to the table. I haven't spent a lot of time, working with APIs that other social media networks provide. I imagine there's some potential for others to provide this. But again, I think the main thing that Twitter brought was really over indexing, not over, but just focusing on the real time nature of this. We work with partners who built tools based upon that latency. It's something we really focused on. If the network ever slowed down, believe me, my partners would let us know almost in real time. So, and just the public nature of Twitter made it so unique. There's all these other federated type systems where you may have a community over on one server and a different community over here. And until we have these bridges between these different communities, it's going to be a challenge. And honestly, I don't know a lot about the APIs that, other like Snap or Meta, what they provide. I know Meta, as one example, yeah, they have a pretty extensive set of endpoints that make up their API. My gut tells me it's really driven to help advertisers automate their advertising. I'm not really sure about the real-time nature. I have to, even a 3-minute latency or a 10-minute latency to get your tweet or your posting out is critical. And, that was really the special, or still is the special thing about Twitter. And that was really when I went to hydrology conferences or really anytime I had the chance to do a demo, I would demonstrate the lack of latency in posting a tweet and then seeing it show up in my feed on my computer. And the fact that it was like, in some cases, less than a second. That really opens the eyes of a lot of, data and engineering folks. Like, wow, that is rocket science. And that is a special superpower that Twitter has.
That's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
Andrea, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, that echoes a lot of what I heard from emergency management folks. That Twitter is really the only current social media platform that has this real time linear timeline. Um, if you look at Facebook, their algorithm, is geared to promote other things, and they're actually moving away from news as well. They're not going to place as much emphasis on that. So, I think the potential would be there, but they'd have to change the way their algorithm displays posts on your timeline. And Instagram, sort of same thing. Um, and an issue sort of with emerging platforms like Mastodon, besides the sort of decentralized nature and siloing, if you're joining it, is that at least from the perspective of government accounts, a lot of local emergency management offices are really small, have really limited budgets. They don't have the time or the manpower to invest in learning a new platform and figuring out how to reach people on it. There's also bigger sort of security, um, I guess, aversion. They, they it took a while, I think, to get people, you know, government accounts onto Twitter and to say, yes, this is safe and effective. Um, and so there's a lot of proving that will have to happen with those platforms before you would be able to get, those offices onto those platforms. So it really limits the effectiveness. Every one I talked to said, there is nothing like Twitter. It has become, for better or worse, integrated into the way we communicate with the public in these situations. And I think up until now, it has probably on balance been for the better. How that continues.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that point too. I mean, already there were tools that, a small emergency management office in some county somewhere could, be a tweet deck, or I worked with partners that made their software platforms available at a, sort of a nonprofit type pricing. And I'm biased, but I do think, if I always kind of joke, like, if you hired a computer science intern for a summer, at the end of that summer, they could have built you a really useful tool for not only listening for local tweets of interest, but for automating whatever software you're using for your monitoring system. And, in the back of my mind, was planning on setting up a workshop, sort of a hands-on coding workshop where you bring the computer language of your choice, and we'll sit down and show the basics of these two things, the listening side and the publishing side. So maybe there's opportunities to still do that down the road, but I do think the Twitter API was very accessible. It was free to academics. It was free as long as you're not pulling in more than 500,000 tweets a month, which for a local area would be an extremely amount of tweets around any flooding or hurricanes. It was free and as fast as the paying customers. So we had a lot of unique characteristics that really, there was low, barriers to entry.
Wow. Well, I will say, for anyone who's interested in more of the technical side and wants to maybe get in touch with you going forward, there's a link to this Google Doc that you did back in April in the post that's there at revkin.substack.com. And this is just one huge resource. It has case studies, it has, again, a whole FAQ on getting started.
Yeah.
So that's in the that itself, just that Google Doc, was a huge public service, I think. Do you have a sense? Are you taking a little bit of a break, or do you already have a vision where you want to be going in the forward?
I don't know much beyond the next 2 weeks. I'm not going to get too serious in the next 2 weeks. So I'm going to do a lot of bike riding and do some skiing for sure. But yeah, I'm definitely, but having said that, I have some, early threads that I'm pursuing. Definitely have my first love is monitoring systems and public safety systems. So who knows, I may return to that. We'll see. I do enjoy dev relations, that opportunity to, get excited about some technology and go out and mentor and have an opportunity to teach in some cases. That's something I really enjoyed as well. So we'll see.
Well, we were talking before you, sorry about that echo. We were talking before you quit about some brainstorming with the Columbia Climate School to see if we could help. But we'll see what we can do there.
If you ever want to set up a workshop, let me know.
Good. And by the way, where did Snowman come from? I assume you're a skier, or?
Yeah, grew up in Minnesota. That's skiing is really what brought me first to Colorado. And then in grad school, I did a master's thesis on monitoring snowmelt around hazardous waste sites to model, the plugs of water from snowmelt into the soils. So I don't know, snow is one of my favorite weather things. So that's why Snowman.
Andrea, any other questions from you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you have any visibility into kind of where things were, when you left. I've talked, to one person who was still there, and it just sounds like everything is really paused. The programs they were working on, they're like, we can't really do anything because we just have no idea what's going to come from on high. And it sounds like everything really has to go through Elon right now,
Yeah,
to know
yeah,
what's going to come.
yeah. That's my impression as well. The timing is just, I guess, I don't know when the timing for this would be good, but we had some other features that we're on the cusp of releasing. Some really neat things to sort of customize your Twitter experience, around timelines. You can imagine setting up a timeline that's just around emergency or your local offices or your National Weather Service, whatever. So I don't know. I don't know what to think of things like that in terms of will there be a push to put it out? Who will put it out? Who will maintain it? Yeah, but again, I can't believe the APIs themselves would be let go. Again, they drive some significant revenue, and they really help expand the reach of Twitter. With this toolkit, you can build all kinds of amazing things. There's folks like, I don't know, gaming consoles. They use these APIs to blend in conversations around some game or something, in the experience. So the use cases are endless. And these APIs just represent the basic building blocks of building these types of things. So that's what I loved about Twitter is like, whatever your interest is, mine was flood warning. I jumped in and was like, oh, of course Twitter is a tool for this. So whatever interest you have or community you want to build, it can be a really useful tool, obviously.
I just happened to stumble on this. Actually, if you could mute when I'm Jim, I think it might be some feedback from you. Let's see. Matthew Ingram, I think he's at the Columbia Journalism Review. This is in 2016. He tweeted, in an alternate universe, Twitter never went public and is a profitable real-time news utility with an open API and multiple revenue streams. Now, suppose the worst happens here. Somehow Musk declares bankruptcy or just wants to do a fire sale. Could it actually go back to being, could we wind the clock back to what he said in 2016?
Maybe. I mean, it's funny. It is an open API today. We do have multiple revenue streams, so some of this seems like real and current to me.
It's there anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just hard to predict the future. I've been blown away by the last 4 weeks of my career in life. I have no idea what's next.
Yeah, I guess Silicon Valley has had these kinds of moments. The news business has as well. Some newsrooms where a new publisher came in, there's been abrupt change, very disruptive, and some of the chains and the like. I guess this is sort of a hazard to having something that has a public utility sort of value, but that's really a commercial enterprise ultimately. The public service side of journalism generally is still in deep doo-doo right now. And if you end up with a news site that's just chasing clicks, even during the extreme event, is that useful? I keep thinking the news business could do a lot more of what you've been developing on Twitter itself, where we're providing communities with data, with sort of map data, with real-time awareness, not just with stories. This happened at the Atlantic Monthly during the COVID pandemic with the COVID tracker. So I still feel what that model, how you've utilized that part of Twitter, extends beyond Twitter, but is still kind of background. I don't think there's enough awareness of what can be done that way.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the challenge of being a commercial enterprise yet becoming this utility. And yeah, it's an interesting situation to be in. I always felt that Twitter, as what's the saying, punched a lot bigger than its weight. I mean, you talk about even when we had 7,500 employees, then you look at a Facebook that has well over 100,000 employees. You don't notice a lot of people on Twitter saying, "Hey, I'll be over on Facebook. Come catch me there." It's interesting. In Wall Street, I always seem to view, why isn't Twitter more like Facebook? Why don't they have 3 billion users or whatever the number they throw out? And then 5 years ago, we had 4,000 employees, and I thought we were actually a pretty lean and efficient group. And now, of course, Twitter's probably down to, I don't know, 2,000 employees. I'm not sure.
No.
Yeah, from what I understand, there's concerns too with, especially engineering ranks sort of being decimated about less, the Twitter just sort of disappearing suddenly, but just lots of little things going wrong and sort of accumulating over time. We've seen a couple of them sort of happen already, but just becoming less stable overall gradually.
Is that I've seen kind of conflicting assertions about how much brittleness there is. Jim, I don't know what that feels like.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of unknowns here. I mean, yes, I think it's likely that some cracks will start revealing themselves. It's been a long time since Twitter went down, and last time it went down was probably for half an hour or something. If it goes down again, who knows? That half an hour could turn into several days. But I do think it speaks to how well engineering had been doing over the last 8 years to make this network so stable and so real time. I think if it doesn't go down, it's a testament to what was built, not that, we didn't need all those people.
The other thing that drives me a little nuts about the lack of, well, hopefully there's more awareness after we're done here in this hour. And if people are reading Andrea's stories and following Sam Montano's tweets and other people, there's this priority globally now. The UN, the WMO, back whenever that was in March, issued this new mandate not a mandate, but a goal for by 2030 to have virtually everybody in the world have access to prompt, weather warnings. It seems like the perfect moment for that API capacity to be really, for people to be actively looking at that, investing in it, not just as a public good, but I'm sure insurance industry, other people must be focused on this question. So I guess what can we do? Maybe I'll say, what can we do together or individually to sort of drive this forward? Who doesn't get this? Elon?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing. I always thought Twitter is sort of this, it could be a communication layer that you rely upon without tweeting much or even reading your timeline. I'd get excited about the direct message private layer where you could envision a system where you use Twitter to enroll into some sort of notification system, and you check the box or whatever to say, yeah, when something's happening in my area, send me a private message, which are much harder to miss, I think, than a random tweet on your timeline. So it's kind of an interesting concept. Like, you could harness the power of Twitter and those different communication layers. I mean, none of that, as far as I know, is going away. So, it's not always about the tweets. It could be about the communication layer that Twitter provides, and especially on the private side.
Are there already applications using that sort of opt-in direct message thing? I hadn't heard about that.
It's not as widespread as I'd hoped. It's a quick little story. I was at a hydrology conference back in 2017 and set up a demo that did that. You'd come in through a chat bot on Twitter, through DMs. And this is all around the state of Texas, because I was working with the USGS Water Science Center. And they've done some really great things on Twitter. But the way it worked is you would pick, like, through a menu, basically, the city or the town or the county you wanted alerts for. And then and then it would rely upon what Texas USGS was doing was they were taking, working with the Weather Service, they were tweeting out either rain alerts or river level alerts, and they geotagged them. So then I built the system behind the scenes. I would listen for tweets like that and then match it up to who opted in and then send them a DM when something hit in their area. And the coolest thing about it was I was doing this demo during a talk, and sure enough, it was raining hard throughout Texas, and people in the room were signing up at the start of the talk. And by the end of the talk, they were getting alerts through Twitter about flooding in their area. So it just was kind of a perfect storm of doing this demo for the state of Texas when it was raining really hard. But it really opened up a lot of people's eyes, obviously. But it's not the simplest thing to build, but it's very doable.
That's really cool. And I assume this has been used for other hazards, wildfire. Earthquake is a little tough because it's so instantaneous.
Yeah.
Although the earthquake now, they do have, like in Mexico City, in areas where the geology is a certain way, you do have a second or two, at least, to duck and cover.
And I saw on Twitter this morning the Jakarta system was getting responses around the earthquake that they just had in the last 12 hours. And that's one push that team is doing in Jakarta, is to make the system not just so flood focused, but wildfires, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. So that's the cool thing about these tools, is if you build it and it's really seen as a notification system, then it doesn't really matter why you're notifying. And I don't know about the Texas system. It's very focused on rain and hurricanes and flooding, but certainly it could be extended to alert on other types of weather.
So there's a frontier there to write about. I'll be getting more for sure. And I'm not seeing a lot of questions coming in at the moment. This will be posted for people to share later as well. So if there are, could you talk briefly through how you made the relationship with the folks in Indonesia? How did that start? And again, what lessons can come from that, building that relationship to widening things?
Yeah, it's a cool story. Back in, I think it was 2013, we were still GNIP, but we were, again, a partner of Twitter at the time. And they had this thing called the Data Grant, where they invited academics and others to propose things they could build if we gave them free access to basically the fire hose of tweets. And there was a group of researchers down in Australia who, researched smart cities and different ways to make cities more livable. And I'm not sure how they knew about the perfect storm of Jakarta, the fact that it gets these annual rains, that it's, like New Orleans with lots of below sea level parts of the city. But also what made it unique at the time was the usage of Twitter was off the charts. It was one of our biggest heat maps of Twitter users in the world was in Jakarta and Indonesia. So they were like, well, let's build something where Twitter's sort of the communication layer, not only for listening, but also for alerting. So they won this data grant. And then it became so successful, and everything they built was open sourced. And it just, the researchers essentially moved on to other things. In fact, the group that kind of started it up all kind of spread out around the world, but they left behind this open source system that basically was adopted by local folks and remained as sort of a nonprofit. And it just, grew its own legs and has lived on ever since. And then as a partner engineer at Twitter, because I worked with them early on, I just sort of adopted them as one of the partners I took care of and helped, make sure they had the access they needed, consulted with them around, different features, working with our policy team to make sure that everything they're doing was, within the policy and within the rules. So anyway, I just loved working with them and continued that up until last Thursday.
Wow.
So,
Andrea, I was planning with Jim to have a webcast with folks in Indonesia on how that played out, but we'll have to figure out another way to get at that.
Right.
It's a great story. So that, I guess the question then is how to spread the joy, how to spread that case study of Jakarta, how to make sure, there was the 100 Resilient Cities project, the Rockefeller Foundation. There is these big adaptation alliances. Are they remotely engaged on this kind of thing? Because their whole idea is sort of making a cross fertilization.
Yeah, and I would say they would still have an appetite to join us and talk about it, but certainly they are in the business of already providing all of this technology as open source software. They obviously have lots of expertise in house. I think it's very easy to replicate to other areas of the world. They're expanding into the Philippines, for example. I know I can't remember where exactly, but they're working with other academics, and I want to say somewhere else in Southeast Asia, probably in India as well. So, yeah, that's a group that what they've built could easily be replicated elsewhere. What they may not have is someone to talk to at Twitter to get them up and started with the access that they need.
Right.
Because obviously when they're getting big floods in Jakarta, the traffic is quite high.
Are there other countries or cities that are hotspots for Twitter like that? I mean, in other words, where there's a high user ratio?
Yeah, I think of Japan. Japan has been amazing with innovation. The big thing there is earthquake detection. Early on, I think probably back in 2012, there's already academic studies about how the Twitter was like the fastest dissemination of earthquake data than even the more official channels. So Japan is very much like that. Yeah, those are the two that I think of.
And tsunami warnings is another thing too.
Yeah.
Well, we may call a stop to this shortly if there's Andrea, what if you wanted to storify this, or what do you see going forward?
I mean, the things I'll be watching are kind of the stuff I talked about, how they actually roll out Blue Verified. It's really going to be, from what I understand, most places, emergency management, National Weather Service, and stuff are going to keep using. There's no change to how they're using Twitter right now. I think you'd probably have to see some pretty serious degradation of day-to-day use, and or if some of the changes that Musk has floated in terms of people who buy into Blue Verified, their tweets being prioritized in the timeline so that you're not actually seeing, that's not a thing that that a government agency is going to have in their budget. So if it changes anything changes the way tweets actually appear in your timeline, in a way that would hide a lot of that information, or potentially spread more misinformation, or if the service just degrades a lot, I think you will see some of those agencies start to look elsewhere. I think for the meantime, like a lot of other people, they're just sort of going going with the flow, using it as they normally do, and just sort of waiting. That's where we all are, I guess.
Yeah, it does remind me of it's an extreme event. We don't think about them so much in the information ecosystem as we do in the climate system. But he's created a disturbance in the force. I wrote my first piece about what happened. Well, I wrote way back in May a piece saying Twitter has huge utility no matter who owns it. I said, you can own it. And I listed like 8 or 9 ways that you don't have to pay attention to all the storm and the misinformation. You can use it to build connectedness and build global, partnerships around big questions. But then I wrote another piece about using the idea of a phoenix, rising from the ashes. That I was actually saying maybe in a way this is a good moment because he has thrown a giant rock into the pool of public, what's public, what's private, what's commercial. These are issues that have festered for a long time, but maybe this would prompt someone to finally say, well, we can make Mastodon do this, or we can, if Twitter goes on the market, we can do it in a pared down way or whatever. So is this, Jim, it's been super hard, I imagine, for so many thousands of employees at Twitter and for users, who are freaked out. But if you step back and look at this with like a 20-year time scale from 2007 through 2037, is this, or 24, is that 30 years or 20 years? Okay. Is this a good thing? Could this be a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Twitter, it's made the need for a public real-time channel like this very obvious. And who knows what will happen with Twitter over the next year or so. But I would have to think that if Twitter moves away from providing that for whatever reason, that something will fill that void. But at the same time, building Twitter was a decade effort. And there's just so much complexity behind it in terms of privacy, in terms of privacy regulations, just the plumbing involved is amazing. And the fact that it's so fast and so public and global. I don't want to, I have no idea like how hard would that be to rewrite from scratch, but it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, the engineers I worked with to a T were all super smart and motivated and proud of what they had built. So, but it's not to say that some other service could pop up that provides those characteristics, those features.
And it seems like some places are working, other people besides Mastodon are I've at least seen discussion of some alternatives, and I'm sure other people are thinking about trying to launch things. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Is there, I marvel at Wikipedia as being, I used to write about cathedral building in the context of the big sustainability challenges where everything takes time. It takes multiple generations. It's always iterating. You're building a cathedral knowing you're not going to live to see it done. And Wikipedia is like this amazing, dynamic, scintillating cathedral that's sort of mass produced. And I know Jimmy Wales has been working on some things that are relevant to this discussion, but is that what a vision of some truly public successor might look like? It also is pretty rapid turnaround, but not like second by second.
Yeah, and the key piece in my mind is providing and putting the work in to provide those endpoints that make up an API that really make it easy to automate and to connect to other pieces of software. But yeah, that's an interesting concept, and Wikipedia is another example of this thing that just organically grew and has become so useful.
Is there can AI help build it more efficiently? Something that's like Twitter, but I don't know. I'm sure someone's already working on that kind of question.
Yeah, I don't know what machine learning and AI engineers remain, but obviously it's going to be a focus. I'd have to believe actually that would probably get more of a focus under Elon Musk management. I'm sure his confidence and belief in those type of systems is quite high. But Twitter is a very human network. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see for sure.
I guess maybe we can reconvene in 6 months and see how things are going. There are someone here mentioned San Diego County, and I can't remember if I mentioned it earlier, but the hashtag emerged on Twitter, and the first functioning hashtag was San Diego Fire back in 2007. So Twitter has always been sort of a fountain of a place to test ideas. What was so cool about the hashtag, Chris Messina invented the hashtag in August of 2017, was it was just an idea. Just put a £sign in front of Word and use that as an organizing principle. It reminded me in Harry Potter movies of the port key. If you all just hold on to the hashtag port key, you'll go to the same place. And so hopefully some aspect of Twitter beyond the level of the noise and the chaos, if that functionality and the core developers within that company are sustained, I'm certainly rooting for it to keep going. Andrea, do you feel that same way? I have a Mastodon account, but Andrea, have you been on Mastodon? Are you on Mastodon?
I'm not. I have sort of limited headspace and time. I have a toddler, so
I know.
After work, my time is very curtailed. So I haven't ventured there yet, although some of my coworkers have. Yeah, I'm certainly going to keep using Twitter for the time being, as long as it still performs the uses I need for my job. If the either service degrades or you start seeing a lot more hate speech or other problematic content, that might change my mind. But yeah, for now, sort of maintaining for professional reasons.
Yeah. And Jim, are you going to be on Twitter, as Snowman going forward?
Yeah.
Are you on Mastodon? Are you checking out any of the other?
Yeah, I've started that exploration, but also, certainly through the end of this year, I'll be dabbling in some pet projects that are Twitter based. I want to get my coding skills revved up again. And I've been able to develop lots of Twitter-based things over the years, and there's a few that I want to revisit. So even though I no longer work there, I still have some just my own motivation to get back into some of these projects, for sure.
Great. Well, I really am grateful that you both could be on here for an hour. Andrea, we should get you on more frequently to do some other stuff too.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Weather and climate is us. And good luck with your work at Scientific American going forward. Jim, I'm just showing your Twitter account here if folks want to get in touch with you down the line, at Snowman, and you're on GitHub there. This all gets recorded and posted as a video as soon as we're done. So thank you for this Twitter chat
well,
today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you again, Andrea. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
We'll definitely just see how this plays out. But I'll do what I can to retain people's understanding that Twitter has incredible utility no matter who owns it. I think that's the first step. And there are levels of it that can be deeply problematic, but let's not give up yet. Thanks for listening. I'm Andy Revkin. This audio is from my Sustain What webcast, which I produce as part of my communication initiative at Columbia University's Climate School. Subscribe and get in touch with feedback or ideas for future discussions at revkin.substack.com. If you've gotten this far, a song is in order, so here's my tune, Liberated Carbon. It took 1,000 generations for our species to rise, but gathering and hunting was no way to get by. We yearned to burn more than dung and sticks. Then someone came along and said, hey, try lighting this. He opened up the ground and showed us coal and oil. Said, come liberate some carbon, it'll make your blood boil. Liberated carbon, it'll spin your wheels. Liberated carbon, it'll nuke your meals. Liberated carbon, it'll turn your night to day. Hey, hey, come on and liberate some carbon.
table burns in my SUV. We can light up the planet like a Christmas tree. Yeah, they say that things are getting hot, but hey, we've got AC. Liberated carbon, it'll spin your wheels. Liberated carbon, it'll nuke your meals. Liberated carbon, it'll turn your night to day. Hey, hey, come on and liberate some carbon, babe, it's the American way. Pump those electrons and that gasoline. No sweat or hurry, just turn on a machine. We send an army to the desert to keep this country free. Hey, hey, and to liberate some carbon, baby, for you and me. Liberated carbon, it'll spin your wheels. Liberated carbon, it'll nuke your meals. Liberated carbon, it'll turn your night to day. Hey, hey, come on and liberate some carbon, baby. Liberate some carbon, baby. Liberate some carbon, baby. It's the American way.